Hey engineers, this is Mr. Hernandez, and this week we're going to continue working with the 3D modeling tools in Tinkercad instead of the circuits tools. So this week you're going to kind of double down on the skills that you picked up last time, which included things like the align tool, the group tool, and things like that. On top of that, we are also going to learn how to make our own shapes. So let's go ahead and take a look at what our goal is. Now, since this week, the week that this assignment is going out is close to Valentine's Day, that's going to be sort of our theme this time. We are going to be making everything that you see in this model. So we're going to be making the arrows, we're going to be making the heart, and you are going to be putting a message on it. On top of that, like I said, you're going to be adding new shapes to the shape library. If you look over here on the right side, you can see all of the shapes that you can use in Tinkercad. Well, you guys are actually going to make your own custom shape. That way you can drag it into other projects and sort of combine things. So let's go ahead and get started here. Now, if you're following along, you have this video open, you've got the document. The easiest way to start working on this is to go back to the document, click on your class period. You'll sign in here. And because we are making our own designs here, you're just going to click on the 3D design here and then create new design. So you're not going to go to lessons, you're not going to go to circuits, we're going straight to 3D design. Once we get into the 3D design section in Tinkercad, we're going to click create new design. Once this loads, you can rename this file to arrow, because that's the first one that we're going to make. Now, the arrow basically has three main parts. So there's the tip of the arrow, which is the pointy part. There's the shaft of the arrow, which is like the stick that holds everything together. And then at the other end is the fletching, which is like feathers that are kind of sticking out and help the arrow to fly straight. So we're going to make all three of them. And I think the easiest one to start off with is by making the center of the arrow, which in our case is just going to be a cylinder. So let's start with a cylinder, drag it out onto your plane. And for this one, pretty much all of the dimensions are optional. You can pick whatever dimensions you think look good. In my eyes, having this be narrower and longer tends to fit better. So that's what I'm going to go for here. But feel free to make your own choices. The same thing goes for the height. So I am just going to drag this out, and I know that to make this look good, I want it to be pretty tall, so I'm going to make it kind of extreme like that. Now, after that, we need to add the arrowhead, or the point of the arrow. And for mine, I'm just going to use a cone. Now, again, sizing is a little bit optional here. There's a lot of options that will look good. I'm going to go with a 10 millimeter radius base, or 10 millimeter diameter on the base, and I think I'm going to shrink this down a little bit, down to maybe 15. Now we need to align this. So first I'm going to raise this all the way up. I remember that I made the arrow shaft 80 millimeters tall, so I'm going to raise this up to 80 millimeters. And then I'm going to select both of them and use the align tool to center them. So I don't want to center them this way, because that's going to drag this down. I want to center them this way and this way. And there they are. So now, to make sure that they don't get disconnected, I'm going to group them right here. So that is the first part. And that's a pretty good arrow so far. Now let's move on to the fletching, or the feathers that go to the bottom. Now, unlike the tip of the arrow and unlike the center, we don't really have a shape here in our library that fits it exactly. So we're going to go ahead and make one. And the best way that I found is to take the roof. So I want this to be the same thickness as I made the arrow shaft. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to shrink it down so that it's only 5 millimeters long, which should match this. Now I also can play with the size and shape of it here. I'm going to make this one a little bit taller. Make that one 15 as well. And this is the real secret here. I am going to lift this up. I'm going to go about 5 off the ground. And now I'm going to make a copy of it. So in Tinkercad, you can either go to the top left corner here and pick duplicate, or you can pick copy and paste. The difference being that duplicate will make a copy right away. Like that. Whereas copy and paste will copy, and then you pick somewhere else to paste it. Either way, we need 2 of these. I'm going to make this one a hole. So now we're going to go ahead and drag this one down to the ground. I'm going to use the align tool once again. So I'm going to align them left to right and forward to back, but not up and down. I want them to be separated like this because now when I group them, I'm grouping a hole with a solid, and that means that the hole is going to cut out material from the solid. If you remember working in Inventor, this is the equivalent of the cut tool. So let's go ahead and group those. And there is my first set of feathers. Now here, I'm going to make some copies of this. So I'm going to use the duplicate tool. And I'm just going to separate these out by raising them up like that. Again, spacing is fairly optional here. Anything that looks pretty good, you can pretty much do whatever you want here, as long as it's roughly this shape. Okay, so now it's time to align these. Now, what's becoming kind of a pattern here is that we are going to align these front to back and left to right, but not top to bottom, because this fletching needs to be at the bottom of the arrow. I'm dragging mine all the way to the end like that. And now the last steps for the arrow, we're going to group everything together. And then I'm going to change the color as well because I want these to actually be, I'm going to make these white. Okay. So there's our arrow. And as you're going through the report, this is going to be your first screenshot. So go ahead and pause here, or stop your work at this moment, take a screenshot, and you can add this to your report right here. Once you've added that screenshot, we need to do something really important here. So I want to be able to use this arrow in the next model. That way I don't have to remake it, or I don't have to try and keep track of this whole thing. And so let's go all the way to the right side to where it says Tinkercad Basic Shapes. We're going to click on this, go all the way to the very bottom where it says Shapes Collection. Clicking on that, see it says Create Shape. So if we click on our model, then click on Create Shape, it gives us the option to create this. So I'm just going to name this shape Arrow, because that's what it is. And the other things here are for adding descriptions. In case you make a lot of these, you can tag them. You can also change some settings about it. We don't need to touch any of this. We just need to name it Arrow and then press Save Shape. Okay, so that shape is saved now. So now let's go all the way back to Tinkercad, and we're going to start a brand new model. Because remember, this is our end goal here. So let's go to Create New Design, and the arrow is actually the hardest part here because Tinkercad in their basic shape section actually has a heart model built in. So we're just going to go ahead and use that. I'm going to drag it out here. And I want this heart to be, actually I think thickness of 10 is just fine, but I want it to be a little bit bigger here. Now, if you are clicking and dragging in Tinkercad and you press Shift on the keyboard while dragging on one of the corners, it'll keep the proportions the same, which is really useful 'cause I don't want the heart to end up like this or like this. I want it, when I increase it in size, to stay looking exactly like a heart, just a bigger one. Okay, so there's the heart. I'm gonna change the color now to red. You can make it a different color if you want to, but I'm going to change mine to red. Then I'm going to go down here to the shapes collection, and there's the arrow that we made. Now there's a little bit of a problem here. It is facing the wrong direction. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to rotate it around so that it's flat. And then it's still facing the wrong direction because I want these fletchings to be in line with the heart. So I'm going to do that one more time by clicking on this arrow over here. All right, and there it is. So now we need to align these two. So unlike the previous times, I actually want to align this vertically because I want the arrow going straight through the heart. Now it's up to you. You can make it perfectly aligned, but if your design doesn't call for it, you don't need to. And you can also get a little bit creative with this. You can rotate it further. You can add additional arrows. The only things that the instructions require is that you have a heart and that you have at least 2 arrows going through it. So there's a lot of freedom here. You know, you could increase the numbers, you could have them going different angles, you could have them going different directions as well. Lots of freedom here. Now this is going to bug me just a little bit, so I'm going to select this and I'm going to bring this all down to the ground. Notice how in Tinkercad, whenever you're raising things and lowering things, you want to look for this arrow right here in the middle. Tinkercad will let you move things around with the arrow keys just fine, but it'll only move them along the work plane. If you want to move it up or down, it's easiest to use that arrow. Alright, so as you guys are working, this is the next screenshot that you're going to need. You're going to go back to your report, and you can see the requirements right here. You need the heart and 2 arrows going through the heart, and you're going to take a screenshot and add it here. Now there is one more step here. Coming down here to step 3, you need to add a message to it. So I know that our model so far has arrows going through the heart, so it's not exactly the same, but we're going to take some inspiration from these little sweetheart candies that always have these little sweet messages printed on them. Now, something you might not have known about them is that they actually add new messages every year. So this is a selection of messages that were added a few years ago. So you can pick one of these messages to add. If you've got some of these for Valentine's Day, or you have some at your house, you can look at them and pick a message from those. Or you can feel free to go online and find a message as well. Now, I will note, you can see examples here with the happy face or the mustache. It doesn't just have to be text. You can send a message in a lot of ways. So if you want to add a mustache to your heart, go for it. I'm going to go ahead and assume that we're adding text to it, not mustaches. So let's go ahead and go back to Tinkercad. And we need to get out of the shapes collection and get back to basic shapes. Now you could do this using the text and numbers section, but dragging out individual letters gets really tiring when we could just use the text tool. Now with the text tool, it's going to drag out a big word or a big word that says text, but we can change that by going right here. I'm going to change this one to say BFF, which is one of the messages there. And it needs to sit on top of the heart, so I need to raise this up just a little bit. And I'm also going to change the color so that it stands out from the heart. And now where exactly it sits on the heart, that's up to you. I'm going to press shift to shrink it down like I did before. But the easiest way, once again, to get these set up is raising them up like I did before. You can see the text is a little bit higher than the heart. and then we're going to use the align tool to line them up perfectly. Okay, so that is our last step here. So we've got our heart with arrows going through it, we've got our message, and we can go ahead and go back to Tinker, or go back to the document, take one last screenshot, and you can add that right there. All right, engineers, I hope you guys are enjoying going back to 3D modeling. If you are interested in a slightly more advanced 3D modeling software, similar to the one that we did with Inventor, but that you can run in browser, which means you don't need to download anything, send me a message. I might be able to get you set up with an account for something else. Besides that, if you have any issues, as always, I have office hours at 1:30 every day, and you can always send me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.